In this lecture, we're going to start to look at the syntax for the QML language. Rather than giving you a full lecture on the semantics of QML, I think it's more effective to go to Qt Creator, start building something fun, and then explain the syntax as we go. What we're going to build is something like this. You can click on the red window. It's going to show the color. You click in the Dodger blue circle here. You click on green, you see it says green here. You click on blue, it says blue. And you see that we have some logs in the application output pane. When you click on the Dodger blue rectangle, you see that it says loop. And when you click, nothing happens anymore, even though we see the log output here. So we're going to build this thing and along the way explain the QML syntax that we will be using. So we are going to create a new project. It's a Qt Quick application that is empty. We are going to save it in a location on our drive. We use this as the default project location for now. We're going to call it QML Syntax Demo. Hit next, choose QMake as your build tool. Choose the latest version of Qt you have installed, and you choose your desktop kit. The first thing I want you to notice is these import statements here. The first one is importing the Qt Quick libraries that we are going to use. And the second one is going to import a part of Qt Quick that deals with showing this window here. If you see this window component is coming from this one. And if we comment that out, you see that the window here is not recognized. So it is coming from this import here. They basically import other libraries and make them available for you to use in our file here. The first thing we want to do is to give this window of ours here an ID. We're going to call it root ID. And an ID is like a flag that uniquely identifies your QML component. You're going to be using this a lot, so keep this in mind. The next thing we want to do is to tell this window to say that it is a QML syntax demo, because that's what it is. And we want to define one property. It's going to be a string. It's going to say text to show, and it's going to be initialized to an empty string like this. This is how you define variables or properties in QML. And we are going to have a chance to talk more about this when we talk about variables and data types. We are going to create a row component. We are going to give it an ID of row 1. And remember, an ID uniquely identifies a QML element in your QML code. And we can refer to this row from anywhere in this file by using this ID here. You're going to see how we use this. We want this row to be in the center. The way we say that, we say anchors, center, and parent. We are going to talk about anchors later in the course, but right now we are using this to tell our program to show this row in the center of this window here. The row is going to be in the center of the window. We want to add some spacing. Let's make it 20 because we want the content of our row component here to have some space between them. And I don't think I said this, but a row component allows you to lay out components on one row, okay, from left to right, if you will. And right now, we are ready to put some things inside. We are going to put in a rectangle element. Okay, so we're going to say rectangle like this. We are going to give it a width of 150 and a height of 150. And if you haven't noticed, this is how you specify properties for your QML components. This is not the first time we do it, but I think it is the first time that I explained it. On top here, you see that our window component also has some properties. We have a visible property to make it visible. It also has a width and a height, and the title that is shown in the title bar for our window here. We are doing the same thing, specifying a width and a height for this rectangle. We also have other properties in this rectangle element. We are going to have a chance to talk about it. But for now, we want to specify a color. That is going to be its background. So we're going to make it red. We want to give it a radius. We want its borders to be round a little bit. We're going to make this 20. And inside, we want to put a component that we call a mouse area. A mouse area is basically a thing that allows you to make something clickable. Okay, so we're going to make it fill our rectangle, and we're going to use anchors again. We're going to say anchors fill parent, and we want to put an event handler that is going to be called when you click on it. The way you do it is like in JavaScript, you say on clicked, and you specify the code that you want to be executed when you click on it inside here. For now, we want to say console log, and we want to say clicked on the red rectangle. Okay, and we should give an ID to this rectangle too. So we're going to say ID red rect ID. Okay, now that we've done this, I want to copy this rectangle and paste it in 3 times. You see that they are giving us this error saying that red rect has been used. It's a duplicate ID. This rectangle is going to be green, so we should say green rect ID, and this one is going to be blue. We should say blue rect ID here, and we should change the message that are shown here. So we're going to say green here, green rectangle, and blue here. Now that we have this, I want to run the application and show you what it looks like. Hit the green button here to run it, and boom, you see that we have our rectangles and they have round borders, which is specified by this radius property here on the rectangle. Another thing I want you to see is that our text has taken effect, the title that we specified. And if you increase the size of the window, you see that the rectangles stay centered in the window as we specified here. We want everything in the row to be centered in the parent. And by now, I hope you see that the row component lays out its contents in one row from left to the right. Okay, you see that the first element we put in was the red rectangle, the second was the green rectangle, the third was the blue rectangle, and you see that they are in this order from left to right. Okay, if you click on the red rectangle, you see that they say you clicked on the red rectangle. Click on green, you see the message. Click on blue, you see the message. But this doesn't look like what we set out to do in this lecture. So the next thing we want to do is to add that Dodger blue circle. How do we do it? We're going to copy the code here for the rectangle again, because that's what we're going to adapt to make it look like a circle. We are going to paste it down here. We are going to change the ID to text rect ID, and inside we want to show some text. The way we do that, we put the text component inside. We have done this in the previous lecture, so we're going to say text, and we want its value to be text to show, the property that we defined on top here. We also want this to show in the center of the parent, so we're going to say anchors center in parent. And just to test, let's say hello here to see that we see this text in the rectangle that we defined here. We also want to make it look like a circle. So we want to increase the radius to something really big. Let's make it 100 and see what it looks like. And before we run, let's make this color Dodger blue. These are some predefined colors that you can use in your QML applications. We're going to talk more about this when we talk about the color property. Let's run the application to see what we have. And boom, we see that we have a Dodger blue circle that says hello. The next thing we want to do is to change this property when we click on the rectangles here. How do we do that? If you look, the ID for this text is not there. So this is a good time to define it. So we're going to say ID, text, ID. Okay, so when somebody clicks, we want to change this text to show property, and this is going to change the text property here for us because we have bound this property to this property here. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so we're going to say here text to show equals red, blue, because this is the blue rectangle. Here we're going to say text to show equals green, and here we're going to say text to show equals red. Let's run. So you see that it says red, it says green, it says blue. Okay, so how is this working? Why is it changing the text in the Dojo blue circle when we only change the property of text to show? Remember, we defined this thing on top here. It is happening because we did the binding when we assign text to show to the text here. So when you do this for the first time, you're doing what we call property binding in QML. You are actually telling your system to keep track of changes in the text to show property, and whenever something changes, that change is going to be propagated to any interested property, and in this case to the text property of our text component here. I hope this makes sense. Let's run again so that you see this in action. Red, green, blue. Okay, I actually want to do something to break this contract here. So when you click on the Dojo blue rectangle here, I want to change the text in here to some static text. So I'm going to say text ID text equals something like loop. Okay, this is some dummy text I put here. So when I run the application, I'm going to still be able to click on red, green, blue rectangle and change the text in here. But when I click on the Dojo blue rectangle, I'm going to break this contract here because I am assigning something else to the property here. Let's run the application and show you what I mean. Okay, the application is here. I can click on red. I see red here. I click on green. I see green here. I click on blue. I see blue here. Let's click on this guy. We're going to see loop here. But when I click on red again, notice that I get the message here, but the changes are not reflected in the Dojo blue rectangle because I broke that property. I have broken the binding between the text to show property and the text of the text component here. I hope this makes sense. Of course, this is just an introduction. We're going to have more chances to talk about this, but for now, you should have an idea that QML is a language that is declarative. It is declarative because you define your components as you need them. And another thing you should notice is that element follow a hierarchy. There is a parent-child relationship between your elements in your QML file. For example, the row component is a child of the window here. The rectangle here is a child of this row component here. And these rectangles are siblings. And you can see that each rectangle has a child of its own, a mouse area. And down here, we have a rectangle that has two children, a text component and a mouse area component. Another thing you notice is that we gave our components unique IDs. We didn't use this row ID here, but notice that we changed the text inside this component here using its ID. We use text ID dot text. If we did text only, just like this, we should have an error when we run the application because this property is not recognized. Okay, so let's click on this and you see that error invalid right to global property text. The mouse area doesn't have a text property to work with. That's why we are seeing this error here. And it gives us the line where we have this error here. So we should fix this by hitting Control Z to bring what we had before. Okay, IDs are very important when you plan to work with that component later in the code, like we did here. Another thing you saw is that in QML, you can respond to events. We had this mouse area component, and we could click and respond to the click in this code snippet here. Okay, we showed the message by logging to the console. We also changed the value of the text to show property here. Okay, so you can do these things in QML. You can handle events, and we are going to have more chances to talk about this later in the course. Okay, I hope this gave you a good introduction to the general syntax of QML. It really is not that hard. If you are familiar with things like HTML and CSS, this shouldn't really scare you because it is similar, even if the syntax is a little bit different. Okay, this covers what we set out to do in this lecture. I hope you had a good introduction to the QML language. I would recommend to go through this again and try to run it or modify a few things on your own to see the effect of your changes. In the next lecture, we're going to look at some data types in QML and how you can use them in your Qt Quick applications. I'll see you in the next lecture.